Okay, I'm going to talk about circumstances and outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to take kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum. So we're going to imagine a poor inner city kid, and there's probably a lot of violence around. There's a lot of crime, and maybe not a lot of good role models to look up to. And then we'll take the opposite end of that spectrum and imagine a child born into wealth, born into a household with good parents, good role models, and a lot less violence, a lot less stress, right? If we run, if we run through these scenarios 1,000 times with these two different children, we're going to expect that the wealthy child is going to become the wealthy adult and ultimately a good role model a lot more often than the poor child who is, again, born into the poverty, born in the inner city with all the crime and violence. They're probably going to become perhaps a violent adult. Perhaps, they won't be a very good role model if they have children, for example. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, right? Every now and then, somebody in that inner city is going to break out of that poverty and they're going to become the good role model. And every now and then, the wealthy child is going to do the opposite. They're going to become perhaps violent, or perhaps they're going to take on a life of crime, right? Now, my point here isn't to say that circumstances always lead to outcomes, right? Because there are exceptions. But we need to, rather, my point is to try to think about ways that we can help those people with those bad circumstances, because we have the evidence, right? The evidence shows us that the poor people, like a poor upbringing, is going to likely lead to a poor adulthood. It's going to lead to those less than ideal circumstances as you age. So how do we bring these people up that are poor? Well, it seems to me that, again, if we take the example of the wealthy child that became the exception and, lowered their class standing, right? They effectively became the poor child. Why did this happen? This is the important phenomenon to look at. How does the wealthy child become the poor adult? What happened there? Well, that poverty, effectively, that crime, that that stressful lifestyle, somehow it spread up into that wealthy class, right? The fact that this exception exists is, again, it's an important phenomenon, because what it means is that you are not free from that stress and from that poverty and from that violence just because you're wealthy, okay? It means that there's going to be exceptions, and the exceptions occur because there is this spectrum, okay? Because that poverty, the effects of poverty are going to sometimes spread up to the wealthy class, right? So again, the fact that this phenomenon exists is important to consider, because what it means is that your wealth isn't what's saving you. What it means is that that we are all connected to each other. It means that we all affect each other. So again, if we're going to talk about strategies as to how we can help these poor people, you have to consider the fact that maybe you're going to become the wealthy person who gets bitten by this poverty and this stress. You have to consider that possibility. And when you do that, what it does is it creates empathy, right? You become empathetic for the people that are born under poverty, and it enables you to help them, and it almost gives you a responsibility to help them, because say you are born into a wealthy family, you got 5 kids, 6 kids, whatever, or you have a wealthy family in general and you have an extended family. Somebody in your extended family is going to be bit by the woes of that poverty. Okay, maybe it's a drug addiction, maybe it's a crime, who knows? You have an obligation, a responsibility to be empathetic for the woes of that poverty, for the people that fall victim to the woes of that poverty. And that's where the solution lies. The solution lies in empathy. It lies in the ability, in the responsibility to help the people below you so that those woes do not spread to you in some way or another. Maybe not you directly, but indirectly through family or something, or friends. And ultimately, what that also means is that if you are in these lower, these lower stratas of society, these poor inner cities and these poor communities, you need to work together, particularly with the people around you. You need, instead of being driven into these, these violent and crime-ridden environments, you need to work together. And it's hard, right? I know it's hard. It's easy for someone to say from the outside, saying, avoid all this crime, avoid this poverty and this stress. But again, it's harder when you're actually there than doing it. But if you allow yourself to victimize yourself and say that this poverty is who I am and it's therefore going to be who I become, decide who I become, then you're creating self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, at both ends of the spectrum, it's kind of about outlook. And if your outlook is that you can't break out of the poverty, and therefore you justify making conscious decisions that make that poverty worse, or that worsen your conditions, then you are, again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's why it's like, ultimately what it comes down to is you have to work together to better yourself. And when you see people, or when you yourself are making decisions that are bad, and maybe you justify those decisions for one reason or another, you have to start thinking about them deeply and understanding what they're doing to you in the long term. And again, you have to work together with the people around you to improve those conditions, because again, if you depend on the upper class to save you, maybe they don't want to, maybe they're not going to do it. Maybe the message I gave before this isn't going to spread to them. So as that poverty-stricken individual, you need to take your community and you need to bring them up. You need to fight extra hard to become conscious of the behaviors that are self-destructive. So it's really about outlook. Okay, so we could say that circumstances lead to the logical conclusions of those circumstances, right? So poverty leads to poverty and wealth leads to wealth. But the fact that there are exceptions, again, that phenomenon proves that we are connected to each other. It proves that the poverty sometimes affects the people born into wealth, and the wealth sometimes affects the people born into poverty. Okay, so when that happens, when those exceptions occur, what is happening is the wealthy people are working with the poor people, and vice versa. So like, if you're wealthy and you get caught up in some drug addiction, it's because you were probably mingling with some poor people, perhaps, that were using drugs. And vice versa, if you were a poor person and you managed to break out of that poverty and become a wealthy person, it's because you were mingling with the successful people, right? The wealthy people. You probably adopted some of their behaviors, just like the drug addict, or the wealthy person adopted the drug addictive behaviors, right? The drug addiction. Well, you need to basically work together with the people around you and look at those behaviors that lead to success, and you need to put them into your life. And my advice, the first thing in this process, I swear, is diet and exercise. It's the most important way to get this process started. Okay, I mean, I read about these things. People, they look into the fast food chains, right? They're always talking about fast food, and I was just reading something about McDonald's getting rid of the soda machines in the lobbies, right? So the self-serve soda machines, and people, like, they're getting emotional about this, and it's like that soda is like poison. It's terrible for you. And as somebody who has a diet that is I probably eat healthier than 99.5% of the people on this planet, and it's like I can truly see where this these bad diets lead to, because I once had a bad diet. And exercise as well. Exercise is like, if you're using drug addiction to get rid of your stress instead of exercise, it's literally just digging you further into a hole, as opposed to digging you out of that hole and opening up new doors that you might not have thought were possible. So again, focus on diet and exercise. If you are stressed out, if you're under a bunch of economic stress that you can't seem to break out of, and you're in a crime-ridden environment, you have to look to the behaviors that successful people use. And it's not necessarily financial success. Okay, there's plenty of people who are a lot happier than these millionaire, billionaire CEOs, and it wasn't wealth that made them happy. It was peace of mind, and some of that peace of mind comes through wealth, but a lot of it comes through just being happy with your behaviors. Okay, there's a lot of CEOs who drink themselves probably to oblivion every week. That's not healthy. Okay, and they'll tell you it's not healthy. They know it. They know they have a problem, probably better than most people. But again, it's all about behaviors and outlook. Okay, so if you use your circumstances to tell yourself that you're going to be a victim to those circumstances, you're going to end up being a victim to the circumstances. And it's obviously going to be harder for that poor person to avoid those behaviors that are self-destructive, because they're surrounded by them. At the same time, though, if you have access to too much wealth and you don't have to struggle for it at all, and you are given access to those self-destructive behaviors, you could fall victim to them just as easily. And again, that's how that wealthy child becomes the poor adult. It's all, again, it's outlook and behaviors. Okay, you have to not victimize yourself and work with what you have. And again, start with diet and exercise. Anyone can go out and run. Anyone can go out. I mean, you might be even get your hands on a bike. Anyone can do push-ups and sit-ups. Okay, it's not that hard. And if you're going to make an excuse that food is the problem, the healthy food is expensive, that's just not true. Okay, and you have to try hard to buy healthy food cheaply. You have to look for coupons, and you have to shop wisely. But it can be done, and the proof is that I do it. Okay, and I do it pretty well. Okay, if you're going to McDonald's and you're eating, I don't know, a 1,500 calorie meal for $10, I eat 3,200 calories of healthy food for about $12 a day. Okay, and I mean healthy food. The difference between those is large. Okay, it's when you're eating 3,200 calories of healthy food versus 3,200 calories of processed food, or however many calories you need, it's a big difference. People think that just because they hit their macros, they get their calories, that they're healthy. It's not how it works. You have to get the micronutrients. Fiber is also healthy for you. I'm going off on a diet tangent here, but again, don't victimize yourself, because you're going to lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy if you victimize yourself. If you make yourself a victim of your circumstances, you're going to become a victim of those circumstances. On the other hand, if you make the assumption, literally just believe wholeheartedly, make the assumption that you're going to break out of those circumstances, you will. Okay, and it's hard to believe that when you have been beaten down your whole life, but you have to try. And if you don't try, how would you ever know? You have to try really hard. And again, a lot of people, they start down a path and they get beaten up the first day or the first week, and they say, I'm gonna justify my old bad behaviors again, and then it just creates a vicious cycle. You can reverse these vicious cycles and make them become benevolent cycles, and that's what you have to do. Eventually, if you work hard enough, what's going to happen is these vicious cycles, once the benevolent cycles start, you just build and build and build. And that's the secret to the people who are born with those good role models. They understand this process, and they've lived in that benevolent cycle their whole life. That's what you have to do as a somebody who's not born with all of the opportunities. Okay, and you have to work with the people around you. That's the biggest factor here. You have to work with the people that can help you, and they have to help you in return. You have, I mean, it's ultimately, if you remain in these victimhood mindsets, you're kind of remaining in like an individualistic mindset. You need to break into the collectivistic mindset. Okay, it's less egotistical, and what happens is you unify and you use the power of numbers that you have. If you don't use the power of numbers that exist in these poverty-stricken environments, then you're never going to break out of them. You have to use the people around you, and they have to use you. You have to work together. And if somebody is particularly, like, if you look at a wealthy household and somebody is getting beaten down and everyone else seems fine, those wealthy households, they focus on that person who's struggling, and it's because they can, right? You have to do that as somebody who has been born without all the opportunity that wealthy people have. So just give that a little thought. Thanks for watching.